Hello, everyone. I'm here once again with Sol. We're going to speak about Ceres in the year of 2024. Ceres is in Capricorn, squaring the nodes. It's very involved in the upcoming solar eclipse. It's going to be going retrograde and staying in a square to the nodes for several months, and it will be involved in the eclipse cycle that will happen in October. So there's a lot that we're going to unpack. Before you proceed, we highly suggest, if you haven't already, take a look at our conversation that was just recently posted on Ceres. In that talk, we went really deeply into the essential meaning of Ceres in the natal chart and how to understand it in a more evolutionary context. It was a very beautiful talk. So please check that out if you haven't done so. Okay, Sol, welcome back.
Thank
Let's just
you.
start with, will you set the foundation for what does it mean to have Ceres in Capricorn?
Well, Capricorn is a very interesting archetype. It's one of my favorites actually because of this relationship to, to Saturn. Saturn is the planet of alignment, realigning things. You realign back into some sort of, I call it the spine. Saturn, Capricorn, it has to do with the spine. And if you look at it energetically, which I like to do when I look at astrology, I like to look at it from a pure energetic perspective. What is the spine? This is where it's the highway of our nervous system, and all the chakras are aligned to the spine. You have chakras going, like you have the vertical chakras going upwards, the crown, and then the root. This is the connection point of the spine. And then you have all the horizontal chakras where we meet the world going out and behind. You receive and you express energy from your surroundings. So it's way more in the world. It's way more feminine, you might say. When the alignment doesn't work, we tend to get off balance. We get overly focused on one thing, and then we are not completely aligned with other aspects of our psyche, of our needs, of our body, of our totality. So you can call Saturn or Capricorn a sign where we return to a more appropriate and moderate way of using energy. So Ceres in that perspective, of course, has to do, with moderation in terms of demands from society or work or, expectations coming from our surroundings, just mere survival, and also the needs of our body so that we can stay and we nurture through realignment to be realigned again. Now, of course, doesn't mean we have the resources to do that, aka time enough, money enough to take time off, stuff like that. So all these pressures that we face in our everyday life could definitely impact on our capacity to nourish and nurture ourselves in that process. So we get into a bit of a dilemma. It's a paradox that we need to solve. I have these personal needs. Do I have capacity do I have enough
Hmm.
time, energy, resources to nourish myself? And we spoke about it last time too when we met, all these conditioned feelings we feel inside of ourselves, that makes it hard for us to just go into a more yin mode where we are more receptive and stuff. And one thing we've seen with Pluto going, crossing this long journey through Capricorn is that there was a lot of deconditioning going on, collectively and also for us personally. I called it more or less an ancestral healing. You had everything, like you had the whole like Me Too movement, for instance, kind of wanting to create justice, again, where there's been great injustices, where there's been lack of balance and poor alignment, poor balance between different parts of society, in this case, men and the power balance between men and women. So we do have this conflict in Capricorn where the external meet the personal, and there's like little room for the personal. There's not this luxury of being able to necessarily take care of oneself in the way that we would want. But on the other end, there's also a discipline available for us to discipline ourselves. Capricorn is a sign where we do what's needed to be done. We can't just like there's like without doubt, this is not it's not debatable. If you do this, it will work. Right. So it's a very mature sign. It doesn't throw a pity party. It doesn't do these it tries to, person with a lot of Capricorn energy in them will always try to overcome their own tendencies of immaturity, of blaming, of um, giving up or running away or refusal to take responsibility in these things. So Ceres in Capricorn is a very mature Ceres. So you might find yourself, the people who are listening in this to this conversation, to be in a situation where those responsibilities that you've taken on in life, your responsibility towards other people, we've established that Ceres is one that also gives out nurturance to others, could have a very vital part in a community or in society in general. Like people I need to deliver in a way. So there could also be this initiation feeling into a deeper, even a deeper and more healthier approach to that particular responsibility. Like even though you might not get all what you needed and enough time to sleep or stuff like that, you rise to the occasion and you do what you have to do. So there is this element of self-repression in it, but at the same time, if that's balanced well, it doesn't have to be necessarily as bad as, going around feeling self-repressed. But I think a lot of people who already shoulders a lot of responsibility might feel that there might not be as much time for one's personal healing processes
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
would be, well, needed, right?
This is so insightful. I want to share a couple thoughts here. Each time you share, I find myself taking notes, like, oh, that piece, that piece. I'm thinking about the mythology of Ceres, and where at some point she created that temple, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and as you told it, it was sort of after this whole phase of wandering, looking for her daughter, and sort of saying, okay, I'm going to create this temple, and I'm thinking of this as I'm going to do something about this. And just
Mm,
thinking from a Capricorn point of view, we have our responsibilities in life, and
mm,
it can feel very daunting. We can feel non-equipped, like not ready. It's like a
mm.
child needing to wake up and hold the responsibilities of an adult. Like, how do you do that? That can actually feel overwhelming. Um, Either we might find ourselves avoiding what we need to do, not taking that responsibility, or just living in this unresolved grief. I think one of the deeper dimensions that I'm grasping with Ceres and Capricorn is not grieving, not actually creating the space to meet the demands, the challenges. So I think about these different life cycles that we go through in life. I actually found this amazing song from an artist named Christopher, and that's all I know about him. And he writes this song about mourning the loss of his freedom when his child was born.
Mm,
And
mm.
then once his child grew up, the next verse in the song was mourning the loss of the sweetness and the innocence and the beauty that he's never going to get
Wow.
back from when his
Yeah,
child
yeah,
was a
yeah,
little
yeah,
a
yeah.
little baby. And the whole song is this
Wow.
progressive, like, I miss it when it was back then, and I don't. Oh, and this is the point. I won't be able to make it. I can't do this. I forgot what the lines were, but had something to do with this will be too much for me. I've lost my time.
Mm,
I'm never gonna get that time back. I won't be able to do what I need to do. I won't be able to meet the needs and the demand. I won't do a good job. It's all Capricorn. And I think we
mm.
can really,
Very.
again, coming from the sort of feminine initiatory quality of Ceres, where we really appreciate how little wisdom and appreciation there is in society and culture around that, we're sort of just expected to enter into these new phases of maturation. So I think of Ceres and Capricorn as the crone, right? This is like the matured, um,
Mm,
nurturing archetype that says life is bringing change and it's hard and things are not going to be the same way now as they were then. We're in a new cycle,
mm.
and let's set up a
Yeah.
space to give sacrifices, to grieve, to work with that energy and show up for it. So the thing that Ceres was responsible for is she accepted the reality of things, right?
Mm.
She's only going to be with me, her daughter's only going to be with me for part of the year, and that's going to be how it is. I'm not going to fight that. I'm going to take responsibility for my life as it is and
Yes.
make it work. So, the issue around repression, I think,
Mm.
is one of the biggest ones right now. That's what I'm grasping about Ceres. Repression, kind of sucking it up. Oh, I gotta get up. I gotta, and then we lose that self care. We lose
Mm.
that self nurturance. We lose the ability to access a sort of emotional vulnerability because we're so stuck on the needs and the roles and the obligations and the necessities of our life. So working with Ceres and Capricorn seems to have a lot to do, or Ceres for in natal charts, Ceres in the 10th house, or Ceres in aspect to Saturn would all speak to the same dynamics. Um, Learning how to take responsibility for one's life and the needs and the demands of one life and to provide and to nurture, but there's going to be an initiatory process for many souls to some degree of finding that nurturing and that discipline to create a life of care and nurturing in the midst of uncomfortable changes and adaptations to life cycles and experiences.
The thing is, when we can, we are always talking about the full spectrum, the energy of the individual chart. You have a very, let's say you have a very lunar, very Neptunian, very watery chart. This Ceres in Capricorn transit can provide good structure for a life that's been very out of
Mhm.
direction, very swimming around, not quite deciding about anything, a lot of mutable energy everywhere. It can really provide like a good proper opportunity to kind of like, okay, you've got these resources, use them well, create structure in your own life. You need structure in order to feel safe. This is now we're dealing with what we need in order to feel grounded in this world in Capricorn. What do I need? And we need to be realistic about that. And it's very realistic sign, Capricorn. It's very like, yes, that's a great excuse and explanation, but that's a very Capricorn thing to say. That's a great dream, but it's kind of like moderating everything into some sort of reality orientation again. For those who have already way too much of this control, etc., and so forth, because Ceres is making some pretty interesting aspects, not just to this um, eclipse, but it's going to be, you know, surfing in a square to the nodal axis at the same time. So there's some karmic energy coming through there that has to do with relationships and the individual Aries need to express oneself as is coming into kind of like a crossfire with this particular Ceres in Capricorn, which is that mature grounding voice that says, you know what, we have to maintain a certain control. We can't just let it all loose. We have to be have some structure in here to balance out this all of it. But for those who already have so much control in their lives, they're already, super organized, very much into the material world. This can be a little bit, they can have these issues coming from other people that will help them wake up so that they let go of that which they shouldn't control or can't control anymore. So there's like this huge letting go of some relationships happening at the same time, or some relationship patterns or habits in our relationships, so that we can kind of like evolve away from that which is blocking us from finding a deeper rhythm, and as you mentioned too, a deeper acceptance for all the cycles in life that we are simply forced to go through whether we like it or not. It was a beautiful poem, by the way. That's exactly, it was like such a Capricorn poem. It's like you grieve when you lose your freedom, you grieve when you lose your toddler, you grieve. It's like, it's all these grieving for each little episode of our lives. So we're really like looking at the astrology for 2024, and particularly zooming in on the eclipses and what's going on the nodal axis, and with Aries coming through so powerfully, is like, this is who I am. You cannot define me, mother. You have this you have a kind of like a struggle in terms of how these conditions and definitions and um, all these traditions define us in the way we do things and how we act and how we go about life, in order to kind of we cannot look at Ceres and Capricorn without looking at what's going on with the nodal axis because they're in such close proximity to each other for the time being. And we cannot look at Ceres and Capricorn without looking at the individual differences. You have people who will need a more mature, stern, grounded, serious control in their lives, whereas other people, they have way too much of it. They have to learn to let people go
I
and do
think
their own make
this
their own
nodal
mistakes.
axis, I think this nodal axis in some essential ways is sort of the hard knocks of being told no, or telling someone else no. There's so much in this
Yeah,
around, hey, I
yeah.
can't do this anymore. So
Mm,
let's share the screen
absolutely.
here so we can actually move into, because this is really
Using
what
charts.
instigated this whole series of talks really, because Ceres squaring the nodes is
Yeah.
so significant. Anytime a planet squares a nodal axis, this planet becomes essential to our ongoing and collective soul evolutions. Okay, here we have the chart of April 8th. The nodal axis is where we emotionally integrate our experience. So anytime a planet squares that nodal axis, there's something that needs to be fundamentally resolved and understood and integrated in order
Mm,
for us to
mm,
emotionally have completion, right? Like when we have an emotional integration, we're complete with our experience. We're not unresolved. Like emotional integration is the fundamental bottom line for integrating experience and evolving and getting to know ourselves in fundamentally new and useful ways. Like we're not going to be able to integrate and evolve, awaken to a greater dimension of our being without emotional integration. So when we're moving forward in life with the roles, responsibilities, needs, conditions, whatever, and we're not meeting other parts of ourselves, it creates that split. So this very much speaks to, do we know how to say no? Aries North Node relative to the affinity addiction of Libra. I'm playing these roles and these responsibilities, and to what extent am I caught in on living a life of being what other people want or expect me to be, or society according to my gender or my role, or just like relationship patterns and agreements? There's a lot around. We have the cycles and the rhythms that our conditioned life establishes.
mm,
And relative to all the strong Aries, and just looking at this particular eclipse, although this is present all year, this Aries speaks to, you have a life direction. You have to make choices that resonate with where you're called to go. And that might be new and it might be scary, but you have to trust that. Relative to Ceres and Capricorn, I think there can be a grief, and almost like a self-judgment of, yeah, but if I do this, I'm not going to be the person I'm supposed to be.
hmm.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
I'm not going to show up for the responsibilities that I've committed to or that others are expecting of me. And I think in saying no, or in saying, hey, I'm not available in this way, there might be a need to actually come to terms with the tenderness. And we're looking at that square to Chiron as well, being very strong at this time. And when Ceres goes retrograde, it's going to be squaring Chiron for many months. There's that tenderness of, I'm choosing my path, and I'm also very present to a sort of shame and grief that I can't be the thing that I wanted to be or that others wanted
Mm,
to be. And in order to live a life of self-responsibility that isn't about some kind of old version of deplete myself, sacrifice myself in order to be the person or do the right thing, but rather a self-responsibility where I'm learning how to create boundaries and commit to life experience within my capacities, and am catching the places where I'm just fulfilling the roles that I'm filling for other people because I'm addicted to the people pleasing or to being accepted, or I don't want to be judged, or because of my own shame, or feel like if I don't do that, I'm a bad person. There might be a lot of grief and tenderness in saying, no, I can't do this. And there might be a lot of
mm.
grief and tenderness in someone saying, hey, I can't be this for you anymore. So like you mentioned, a lot of relationship changes. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
broadly, this brings up reflection of whose life are we living? Like the commitment and the choices and the patterns that we're establishing and the discipline that we're choosing for ourselves, are we choosing our own life, or are we forcing ourselves to be something that we're not? I think this series, relative to all the Aries, is inviting a greater maturation, self-responsibility, and self-intimacy to choose the life that
Mm.
inwardly we're guided to live, and to take responsibility for that, for what's needed, for its consequences, for the consequences of our choices. But to choose to be fully present, to choose to live a life that allows us to be fully present, even if it means change. And we know change is one of the hardest things. Just that's the whole essence of Ceres: puberty, life cycles, the seasons. How can we adopt to ourselves or other people in our life relative to how they used to show up or what they're available for now? How do we adopt to that in the midst of all kinds of things? One other example comes to mind. Just think about professionally. You know, so you're an astrologer, or you're a massage therapist, or a teacher, or any kind of work that involves some sense of responsibility and accountability to other people, right? You're a reader and people come to you for guidance. I think the trick here is to really be able to ask ourselves, am I really happy? Am I feeling nurtured and nourished in the way that I'm showing up?
Mm.
Or am I stuck by this defined role, and I'm providing, I'm giving, but actually I feel a deep sense of deprivation and lack and depletion inside of me? We might have to change something about how we're showing up and how we're knowing and defining our sense of direction and purpose, even if the world is like, yay, keep on doing this. If it's depleting, if it's actually, that alignment, if we can't stay in alignment, if we don't feel like we're aligned and strong and actually nurtured by our life experience, we need to say, it's my responsibility, instead of working 10 hours, to create Capricorn more boundaries and say, during these 4 hours of the day, I'm not going to be available. That's going to be the winter time. I'm
Mhm.
not going to be available. The crops won't grow. I'm going to go within and nurture myself, and you will have to do the same too. Like, being less available almost teaches that Ceres wisdom. We can't provide and give all the time in the same way.
No, and as you mentioned, the thing that I thought, like I've been thinking a lot about this nodal axis, of course, as we've all been doing, especially us in the evolutionary field. But because Ceres is at this very pivotal skipped step point, the midpoint between um, these two this polarity, it has to do a lot to clear out addictions that we have, dependencies we
Mm.
have. Okay, so you want to go, so you have like the toddler come, like the youthful kid coming in and say, I want to do this myself, mother or father, and you're like, yeah, but have you created? Have you remembered to do the foundation work? Have you done have you created a structure? Do you have a plan? You want to get, you want to be free, you want to be liberated, you want to go off to the Aries North Node and be free from your dependencies on others. Let's just say it's the marriage, right? So did you provide, do you have enough provision in order for you to survive on your own, for instance? Do you have what it takes in order to take care of yourself,
Mhm.
actually? So there's going to be this dilemma that we have to resolve if we want to kind of like embrace the North Node and come out of this people pleasing you mentioned, or it's like the codependency that is the South Node is always like this residue of it's this is it it's always flaunting, the lower tiers of a sign in a way. There could be like this coming up very strongly, like the shadow side of Libra. I don't have any better words for it, but what's the weakness of Libra, for instance? Well, it's always listening to what other people say. What do you think? How do you feel about it? When I know how you feel about it, I can feel something about it too. Uh, what are we supposed to do? What do you want to do? You have this classic relationship thing going on. It's like, yeah, where you always have one that needs to be deciding everything, and the other one is not doing much. It's more passive, and you have a very passive energy that can very well come through with this Libra South node, manifested in relationship or within yourself. It doesn't really matter. That is being now challenged by Ceres, that says, well, if you wanna get moving to the next level, if you wanna release these tendencies and stop sabotaging yourself and get to a place where you feel free enough to make your own choices and you're ready to be on standing on your own 2 feet, making the unpopular choice.
Mhm.
Sometimes that means making a very unpopular choice. Aries is authentic. There is this Roberto Assagioli, who's the founding father of psychosynthesis. He wrote a book on the will. And in this book, there's this quote about authenticity. And he says, there's a price for authenticity. Not everybody's going to like you. And that's like the worst nightmare ever for somebody who's people
Libra.
pleasing. Or are you
Yeah.
mad at me? Are you mad at me? Or did I do something wrong? So we have to break out of this kind of like these patterns, and be willing to be independent and stand on our own 2 feet. That's what basically Aries is. Are you willing to accept that, yes, you might not have a partner, or you might not get the support you wanted, or you might not get, because there's like something with support with Ceres that might go missing when it squares the nodes like that, or it's in Capricorn. But Capricorn is very strict and stern. It's like, well, if you need it, you're going to get it. But if you don't need it, you're not going to get it. My father always said, if you have a crutch, you're going to use it. If you don't have a crutch, you're going to walk without it. Yeah. So
Such
that's
a good
like
one.
this kind of like, yeah, well, it's like this kind of tough love energy that comes through in Capricorn sometimes. It's like maybe mother isn't giving you any more allowances, or it's like, sorry, like this time now it's about do it yourself, right? Okay. And that's the only way. In order to really, you have to be willing to be on your own 2 feet and not have a security net anymore. This is Aries. It's like, this is me. We don't have 100% guarantee for us being sure that what you find, this is me, that now I found myself, right? Because we change all the time. But for now, this is me right now, and this is what I know, this is what I can. These are my weaknesses, these are my fortes. This is a person who can be on their own because they know about their resources. They know what they can do. They know what they already have, and how, if they're also capable of nourishing themselves when things are hard, when it's not so easy. Um, so we're kind of building some sort of internal confidence slash inner security with this one that helps provide the right, correct spiritual nourishment for us in order to be able to break free from unhealthy dependencies. To be independent doesn't mean you are not dependent on others. This is also one of the paradoxes we are here to kind of figure out with this nodal axis. But it means that Capricorn is always like, well, you don't, is it appropriate to project this need onto others, or are you capable of taking care of it yourself? It makes you think before you project, or you want something, and can you fix it? Can you help me? You ask yourself first, can I help myself doing this? Or is it appropriate if I ask someone else? Is this my responsibility, or is it actually, that person over there that needs to be told that, they're responsible for something? So this is the whole appropriateness of Capricorn, that is very interesting, because it kind of like realigns us again back
Right.
into
To our own
connection. Yeah.
self-responsibility. Something you said
Yes.
really brings up that clarity of there are cycles in relationship where needs are met and where needs aren't met.
Cycles in them. Yeah.
Not everyone is going to meet all of our needs all of the time ever. And
No,
there's that
true.
actual reality to that's the stress of that Capricorn relative to the Aries Libra axis. I'm growing up and I can't depend on, let's say, mother or father to be the one that will care for me
Mhm.
and provide for me. And there are these moments in life where we have to cope with that the coping and the growing and the strengthening in our own capacity to self-source and take responsibility for what we need and what's our
Mm.
responsibility to do. That's a big part of this. And it just brought up the thought of like, there are these moments developmentally where, we might sleep in our own bed for the first time, or we stop breastfeeding, or we'll, put the teddy bears away, or your sibling goes out to college and you're still really young. All these moments where the familial dependency and structural reality changes. Dealing with Ceres, and this is a great turning point for me in my own astrological practice, because I've always been like Ceres curious and like loosely understood it, and would intuitively have guidance when I'm working with someone in the moment. But I just feel like I'm really grasping it more deeply. And I've seen this several times. So when Ceres squares the nodes in natal charts, or when Ceres is on the south node, there's almost always some sort of pivotal personal experience around loss and the lack of basic nourishment
Mm,
and support from early on, in some form. And then like a subsequent
mm,
sort of internal neuroses or challenge, and like, how do I properly care for or nurture myself in particular with food? And I've seen that a lot of times. So Ceres and Capricorn can be the absence of those basic parental forces that provides the ground and the boundaries and the container of safety that says, someone's going to be there to hold my hand when I cross the street. And I think one of the challenges in our own life right now, it might feel like things are suddenly changing, because that Aries energy is almost like, cross the road and I'm not going to go there with you. Like, what if I get hit by a car? That's scary. There can be this feeling of, I need to grow up really quickly and make
mm,
decisions and navigate with my own inner compass. And I don't, because in however this series lands in our own chart, whatever happening with our own Saturn, we're all going to have our own way of internalizing and working with this according to our soul program. But if there is a sense of there being an absence of boundaries in our life, an absence of external, maybe early in life, nurturing figures that would hold a safe and clear container that we can trust will guide us, because Capricorn Saturn is both the child and the adult. It's the child from the point of view of, the child needs to not yet know how to do this on their own. So the child needs to be guided and mentored by parental type figures that will teach them the way kindly, without judgment, without shaming, but with consistency and reliability, so that the child can then mature over time to become that adult. But if that wasn't there, many souls might be experiencing this as, I don't know how to do this on my own. And so there's going to be this going
mm,
within. How do I grow up when I never really felt like I received what I need? I didn't get the tools that I needed as a child. And then for some souls, it'll be the opposite, right? If there is the absence of that structure and the boundaries, parents that were absent, or for whatever reasons you had to jump into experience early in life, there was a death in your family and you had to grow up really quickly, there might be the need to mourn the loss of that innocence, the loss of that childhood, the
mm.
loss of, I
The
never really
childhood.
got to relax and make mistakes. And so there's something about, I'm going to start doing things that are a little bit more, not reckless, but I'm going to start making new choices that, because of my repression, I haven't been making, because I grew up too quickly. So all of these expressions can be showing up, for people, depending on the unique soul
Where
context.
they are. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's one thing too, we've had this square to the nodal axis during Easter, the Easter holiday. And of course, a lot of people experience perhaps being with family, exes, kids, previous partners, different relationships showing up in different numerous ways. And there was one who said to me, like, yeah, oh my God, you're like stuck, with an ex-partner, and reflecting upon, becoming aware of the abusive qualities within that relationship, and feeling rather stuck in that pattern, because there's all this, you should never underestimate Ceres in a good divorce settlement, quarrel, fight.
Mm.
They can be really nasty, because you have part of the story, it's the bargaining between Jupiter and Ceres when she discovers that, oh my goodness, you let Pluto take her. She discovers eventually. And then there's this bargaining going on. And I've seen that several times, this part with ex-partners, and when there's kids involved, or property, or anything that has to do with attachments that we have, very strong attachments to what was created in the relationship. You can have an ongoing manipulative thing that lasts for years. And I think a lot of people right now, if they are in that situation, are really going to feel like shit, realizing like, God damn it, I'm being gaslit, or I'm having some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome, or like you have like these kind of like strange normalized experiences that are actually quite unhealthy and very little nurturing for us, but we have to oblige to, we have to accept them because of these power elements and the bargaining and it's the complications that are involved in this kind of situation, where the situation is so kind of emotionally complicated that it's hard to simply just like, okay, liberate yourself from it. So this is like the dark side of Ceres, we're talking about here now, because it's really it's power games, and it's power imbalance in a relationship, and
Mm.
how that eventually turns into something. The opposite of nourishment is poison, it's toxicity, it's manipulation, it's that part is also part of what we are talking about here now. So it could feel really like fear of death. We mentioned that last time we got together. Like, it can really put you in a state of like really fearing for your life if you decided to break out of this, or if you decided to move to there's absolutely no alternative, right? There's absolutely no alternative to the situation. And right now it's peaking a little bit because Chiron's in the mix, and Saturn conjuncts Mars in Pisces. So it's kind of like it's very intense energy for this
Very
eclipse
big
that really,
moments.
yeah, it can feel really vulnerable, actually. You mentioned the vulnerability aspect to it all, but this kind of, I want to break free, but I can't break free. I'm chained to the situation. There's not a lot I can do right now. So that's very frustrating. And I think what then happens, there's like this rage that come through, there's this inner rage, or like that is really, that can be really prominent with a strong serious placement, this like boiling and seething rage underneath, because of these manipulative control, not getting what you want, kind of like there is a fierce and angry quality to the one who doesn't get what they want. And the goddess wants what she wants. She wants her daughter back, right? So she wants what she wants. So it's not all easy energies to deal with, because you're basically being forced to let go of something that you have a deep attachment to. So
And
it's
that's such a big part of what I noticed, yesterday when we did this interview, you mentioned that, like the sort of the 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 controlling aspect of Ceres. Because who wants to let go of their daughter to Pluto for however many, like there's the first instinct is, no, I'm not going to let go of this. And we're looking at Ceres and Capricorn, which actually, yeah, I'm glad you're bringing, because this is, the harder side of this, but it's definitely for many souls will be a part of it in various ways. This can be the separation of family structure. It just made me think about the
mm,
traditional 3.5 days with mom, 3.5 days with dad.
yes.
And that's so hard to adjust. Suddenly the foundation, the ground, the stability has shifted, and there may not be anything that one can do about it. I think there's something around how do we bring forward that maturity and that commitment to what's important. Like from a Capricorn point of view, protecting the children, caring for them, providing for basic,
Yeah.
and to not get lost in the Aries Libra power and struggle dynamics also brings forward, Ceres had to adapt to the situation. Life was
Mm,
happening, evolutionary necessity. Pluto is basically, change is inevitable here. Cooperate or resist. So it's
mhm.
being able to flow with the seasons and allow for a new Capricorn, a new structural reality to grow. And I think when there's less of that
Which,
competitive struggle element there, there's actually more
mm,
maturity to envision what are creative and thoughtful ways of dealing with difficult and hard change that isn't about this endlessly unresolved grief that will be carried on to the next generation. Being in the
Yes.
parental role or being in the child role and experiencing those kinds of dynamics has historically been deep and hard, right? And I think
Mm.
there's also a way of what does it look like to actually meet that with that stance of care and nourishment and health and well-being, even though it's not this kind of stability that I used to know.
Mm. Well, it's breaking out of these endless repetitive patterns of how we tend to how we have met each other as humans, the way we objectify each other, the self-objectification, and how incredibly toxic that is in of itself, you know, how it ruins our societies and how it creates these cultural wars and how it's just messing with us all because of this objectification. People are human after all, you know, every one of them. So to be able to break free from that mold and I would rather say, you know, who's going to be the first to let go?
Mm.
Oh, who's the first to let go? Who's the first to let go? You know, there's like this, you know, I'm not going to be the first to say I'm sorry. I'm not going to be the first to not do this anymore. I'm not going to be the first because that puts you at risk. If you're the first to stop doing it, it puts you at risk that you might lose it because the other person is not stopping, right? So,
Even like who's going to be the first to like make the bed or wash the dishes, right? Like to not give up on our basic responsibilities, even if there's a lot of
mm,
change and chaos and stress in your life. Um,
mm,
coming back to the
yeah,
ground of it's my responsibility to
mm,
to meet that with care, with
mm,
thoughtfulness, with agency, with love. And I'm responsible for the amount of sleep that I'm getting. And even if
mm,
life says, here, a child's waking up all night, how am I going to tend to myself that next day? What am I going to communicate? What am I going to say? I'm going to drop this so I can do, like, it's not going to be perfect. And I think that's the point. There are going to be stresses and demands, and it might feel chaotic at times. But the growth is, how am I going to meet that with my agency, with my commitment, with my care? And what do I need to change? What do I need to communicate and honor and trust? And that might also mean more change, more, this is not quite
mm.
what I expected
Yeah,
or others expected. So I know you need to go soon. So I'm wondering if we should briefly, if you have the time to just briefly look at the
sure.
charts, right? I think it'd be really helpful to just, ground that. So obviously we have this
Mm,
the solar eclipse, noting the square to Chiron, right? And Mercury, by the way, will retrograde to join Chiron, join
yeah.
this eclipse point, and also square Ceres throughout the month of April. So everyone pay attention to that. That Chiron square, or that Mercury square to Ceres, will naturally elicit more information about how these adaptations to change and finding responsibility and nurturance and growing and getting stronger at this time through Ceres is actually manifesting in our lives. Ceres actually made its first square to the nodes at the end of March. So this process just began and it passed at like 15 or 16 degrees. So we're in the very beginning of a several month cycle. So it's great to be having this conversation now as this sort of is initiating itself within the collective consciousness. So the next transit, this is when Ceres stations retrograde at 21
At
degrees.
21.
And just noting, it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's trining this Uranus in
Mm-hmm.
Taurus. It's very active. It's a very powerful stationing. And this is in May. Now we see in August, Ceres goes all the way back to 7 degrees. And this is when it's stationing direct. And it's
Mm-hmm.
squaring the
Mm-hmm.
nodes again. Wow.
Exactly.
It's squaring the
Yeah.
nodes again at exactly 7 degrees, probably off by like 22 minutes. So
Mm-hmm.
August is a very powerful series time as it's slowing down and stationing at a very tight square to the nodes once again. And then the final,
Mm.
point is, this is October. This is the first eclipse, the solar eclipse, and Ceres tightly squares that. And then we have the lunar eclipse, the second eclipse, and basically Ceres is the midpoint between, it's close to the midpoint between the south node and the full moon. So, by mid-October, I would say Ceres begins to sort of leave the picture, but that's like the final strong transit. So we're in for a very powerful year. Do you have anything you want to share on any of this?
I think it's just so fascinating that this show turns up when you have these powerful nodal axes that have so much to do with the balance between us as human beings, the way we give each, like it has so much to do with relationships, and relationships are so defining for a human being in terms of how we identify ourselves, how we see ourselves and perceive ourselves. And we cannot live without human beings or connections in one way or another. It's rarely healthy,
Mm,
to not have connections. So I think in this particular period, like apart from what we already talked about in terms of human evolution and growing up and taking responsibility for your needs, and or being stuck in these very difficult situations within a relationship, or not having the resources to branch out and go and do your own thing. I think we learn a lot about our own reaction patterns, and how we um, can either nurture ourselves through a very harsh and difficult situation where there's no one there to support us, because that might be something that a lot of people go through right now. It's just like, it's just up to me now. So, okay, I have to maybe accept that for a little while. So
mm,
it isn't necessarily the nourishment you're looking for might not be available yet, but it's going to help you move out of codependent patterns in one way or another that might be more stuck than you realized. You
mm.
might feel very lonely, for instance, but that loneliness might be completely necessary for a little period in your life, because you have to kind of consolidate that Aries authentic voice within you and not be disturbed by other people's opinions and ideas, and be involved. You mentioned this self-isolating quality that might come as an expression of these energies. So I think it's very important, because I feel like it's really helping us to break free from some of the addictions and dependencies that we see collectively, and that prevents us from having real wholesome relationships to each other because of this. What was it? The first thing that leaves the house when there's a codependent thing going on is honesty.
Oh
You can't
wow.
be honest when there's like these power things. You can't speak your truth then, because the price is too high. The price is too high. So that's maybe what we're realizing now. And we are also on a collective level realizing, what is it that we need in order to feel safe? I think a lot of us are feeling, whether or not it afflicts us directly or not, that these huge conflicts that we have going on Earth today are not necessarily what we need. This is like, it's a little passé, isn't it? It's like these, it's challenging our sense of security on a very, very profound level. Like it's doing something to our collective psyche, and I
I
think a
know,
lot of people feel that.
I know you got to go, but I remember learning from you that Ceres can correspond to welfare or sustenance provided programs, and Ceres and Capricorn is literally institutions that are providing sustenance in the place of deprivation. And I mean, there's a lot to say around places in the world right now where there's a lack of that,
Yeah.
it's a failure
Yes.
of being able to provide for basic needs, and it's so difficult, it's so painful,
It's so so painful. Yeah.
collectively and interpersonally, individually. And I love what you said, and I just want to offer this one point, which is the need to maybe go it alone for a while. Fundamentally, it comes back to there's a realignment happening where the structures and the agreements and the conditions of our life are actually more aligned with reality. And thus, we're able to provide, we're able to create more congruency and balance. But it almost seems like the initiatory process has to happen where there is that need to kind of separate from the addictive state that is dysfunctional,
Yeah.
that's not working, in order to kind
It's
of
not working.
recalibrate from a more matured and self responsible place where there's actually more availability to come together with more agency as an equal, with more thoughtfulness, with more responsibility and maturity. So yeah, we're in this deep initiatory process right now.
Yeah,
Feels like
it's about giving and taking as well. This whole balance of giving and taking. There's like this Where does it come from? Why do we give to each other? What is it that are you giving, or is it more a selfish act because you want to feel good about yourself, you know? So I think, we're really learning this sacred law. If we think of Capricorn as being a sign where we realign again. So we're realigning into natural law. If it's the rhythm, finding some sort of rhythm in your relationship is like right now, it's not, we have a lot of demands on us, so we're not, it's not, it's going a little bit like this. But there's like this deep acceptance for that's the rhythm of life. These are the rhythms of life. Right now, humanity is going through a really rough patch, this entrance of Pluto into Aquarius and this collective consciousness that we are all now a part of, and this the madness that is we are facing, the illnesses, the dysfunctions, the lack of safety in our societies, this kind of like this is becoming like a real like for a mother heart or for parents in general. I mean, the father heart, it's not so it's not the gentlest energies we're dealing with right now. So I think many will wake up and start providing that warmth and love and start giving from the depths of their hearts instead of giving in order to get something, like I give you this, you give me that back, this kind of. So that might shine through as well. I hope so, at least. I think a lot of people will see that, okay, there is such a thing as true generosity. There is such a thing as humanitarian souls, brave souls out there that are really just going out and showing us how to do it. This is how you do Ceres, This is how you do it. So I'm, it's Mother Nature, it's Mother Earth in a way. She's coming herself. She's coming and telling us that, this is the appropriate way of doing it. That's not good. So I think we're all waking up to that consciousness, and it's a deep maturation going on inside each and every one of us in terms
It
of
really is. And there's some sort of insight with Ceres being that integration point between the nodes, that midpoint. It, as long as we're still struggling with that balance of I need this from you, or I need this from you, or you did this to me, and the hardness of change and the boundaries that we can't seem to surpass, that are painful, that aren't always equal. I think Ceres teaches us we need to grieve. Again, coming back to something I shared, yesterday,
yeah.
there's grieving, yes, and also relative to the nodes, everything. In order to emotionally integrate our experiences, we need to not run back and forth between Aries, Libra, which is this push and pull, the seesaw between I'll just do what I want to do, and then it's like, oh, but I don't like the separation, so let's try to work this out. It's like the coming home to ourselves is facing the unresolvable nature of our condition. I just think about what's happening in Gaza right now. There's no practical, clear, peaceful, immediate solution. It's one of those things where it's like mercy, like there's just so much grief and pain, and yet what do we
So much pain.
see? So much anger, so much
Mm,
polarized politics and views, where almost like one side or one perspective, or can't possibly fathom the value or importance of the other. And we see that in many parts of politics and social issues right now. And
mm.
it's both growing, but it's sort of pointing to this like crisis turning point where it's like we got to break. We got to
Yeah,
accept
yeah,
that
yeah.
this is the world right now, and
Mm,
these battles aren't the answer. And I can just see how in our own personal lives we probably all have enough content, enough material to work with, that wants to take us. And again, that building of the temple to me is like the symbol of I'm going to create a space to grieve, to do ceremony, to do the sacrifices, to connect with the inner world. And I had a dream recently where I was told you're having problems sleeping because you're not discharging your emotions enough. That's a part of my whole men's group thing right now, where I'm like, yeah, I need to like move all this energy. I got so much responsibility. So there's just something to what's emerging right now, and
Mm.
more loving intelligence in
Mm.
supporting us to be human and supporting us to move through these cycles. And we see how much violence and pain there is in the world when we don't.
Yeah, it's time to open the heart. That's, then let and then the heart is the, it is the place where grief settles.
Wow.
So when we open it, the grief will be expressed again, but the beauty lies on the other side of the grief when the the girl returns to her mother and love is back inside the heart again. So this is it.
Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
something about being able to hear one another using that Libra function where it's like, I'm not needing you to be something other than what you are, but I'm able to be with you in your grief. And at the same time, there are changes, or
Mm.
I'm not going to do this. I'm not, where we make agreements to just be companions to this human experience, even in the midst of fundamental and essential change, because it's can we all appreciate the shared humanity, the shared tenderness of this
Mm.
experience? Like that's true for all of us. So I know you're staying a little extra for this. Thank you so much, Sol, for sharing this
Uh,
conversation with me. It's so enriching, and I hope this is helpful for others. How can people find you?
Oh, they can find me on Facebook. I'm one of your friends. So they find me as Sol Jonassen, Sol Jonassen. It's a Norwegian name. Or they can find me at solvit.com, which is Sol hyphen
Dash dash.
WIT. No, it's not. It's a hyphen. It's like a little line between my names.
Yeah, so it's not an underscore. It's in the middle, right? It's like straight in the
Yeah,
middle.
it's in the
Yeah.
middle. What do you
Sol
call that?
dash or hyphen, same thing. Yeah,
Oh, okay. So it was correct. It's okay. So it's soul hyphen WITH
with
with.com.
.com.
Yeah. Or I
Excellent.
have Polaris, yeah, or I have Polaris Astrology both at Instagram and Facebook. So that's where you
Okay,
find me.
perfect.
Mm.
Put that in the
Mm.
description below, as well as my own info. And yeah, thank you everyone
All
for
right.
watching. Please share your comments in the description what this brings up for you, what you're learning, how you're
Yeah,
integrating this material. We would love to hear from that.
absolutely. That would be so interesting. I would love people to share their experiences with Ceres.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ari, for having me. It was beautiful to see you again. Really, really lovely. And yes, have a beautiful day.